The idea came to me over breakfast, hitting like a lightning bolt out of nowhere. Rebecca had been gone for 3 days. For more to go. 7 in total. Way too long. The house felt empty without her, though I tried not to show it. I kept busy, made sure the kids stuck to their routines, kept myself distracted with work. But something about this morning was different. Sophie was poking at her cereal, dragging her spoon in circles, eyes distant. Mason was hunched over his phone, barely acknowledging the world around him. I watched them for a moment, something stirring in my chest. I set my coffee down. "Hey," I said, clearing my throat. "What if we went to see Mom?" Sophie's head shot up so fast that I thought she might get whiplash. Like, just show up? Mason finally looked up from his screen, raising an eyebrow. "For real?" "Yeah. We could book flights today, be there by tonight." Imagine her face. Sophie let out a tiny gasp, eyes shining with excitement. Mason hesitated, but then, to my surprise, he nodded. That'd be kinda cool. From a 13-year-old, that meant he was actually excited. I took that and ran with it. Within an hour, I had booked the flights. Within 2, we were packed. The energy in the house had shifted. Excitement crackled in the air like static electricity. I pictured it clearly. Rebecca opening her hotel room door, gasping in shock before pulling us into a hug, maybe even crying. We hadn't had a moment like that in years. But something gnawed at the back of my mind. I had called her that morning. No answer. Not unusual, really. Work trips got hectic. I sent a text. "Hey, hope work's going okay. Just wanted to hear your voice." No response. An hour later. "Kids miss you. Call when you can." Still nothing. A little weird. But again, I brushed it off. We landed in Chicago that evening, the city buzzing with its usual energy. Horns honking, lights flashing, people moving with purpose. I rented a car, loaded the kids in, and typed Rebecca's hotel address into the GPS. We were only 15 minutes away. My pulse picked up. I told myself not to call again. I wanted this to be a pure surprise. But something in me itched. A bad itch. 5 minutes from the hotel, I gave in and hit dial. Straight to voicemail. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. Sophie and Mason were chatting in the back seat, completely unaware of the way my jaw clenched. I kept my voice light, reassuring myself more than them. She's probably asleep early. Meetings all day. We pulled up to the hotel entrance, and my stomach twisted for no good reason. I told the kids to wait in the lobby while I checked us in. Sophie bounced on her toes, barely able to contain herself. "We're gonna jump out at her, right?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just give me a second." I walked up to the check-in desk and forced my face into something pleasant. "Hey, my wife is staying here. Rebecca Thompson. I wanted to surprise her. Could you tell me her room number?" The receptionist smiled politely. "I'm sorry, sir, but we can't give out guest room numbers." "Right, of course." I slid my credit card over. "Could you at least call up and tell her her husband is here?" She nodded and picked up the phone. I watched her dial, waited, felt the seconds stretch too long. Then, her expression shifted. "Oh," she said, her eyes flickering toward me. "She's not answering." My stomach coiled tight. "Maybe she's asleep," I offered, because what was the other option? That she was ignoring the call? The woman hesitated. Then, almost too casually, she glanced at her computer screen. "It does say she checked in with a +1, though." The world tilted. "Sorry, what?" My voice came out distant, like it was coming from someone else. She blinked. "Yeah, the room is under her name, but she listed an additional guest." I just stared at her. And then I laughed. Just laughed. Because what else do you do when you realize the mother of your children, the woman you just flew across the country to surprise, booked a romantic hotel stay with someone else? The receptionist looked nervous. I wasn't even angry yet. I was in that weird space right before the explosion, where everything is too quiet inside your own head. "Sir," she asked cautiously, "who's the +1?" I asked, my voice steady. Too steady. She hesitated. I can't disclose that information." I exhaled slowly through my nose. "Right. Okay. Then I need a room." Her fingers flew over the keyboard. She was avoiding my gaze now. She knew. A minute later, I had a key card in my hand. Same floor as Rebecca's. Just a few doors down. Perfect. I walked back to the lobby, plastering a fake smile onto my face so the kids wouldn't suspect anything. We're all set, I said, voice light. Let's drop our stuff off first. Sophie practically skipped beside me. Can we see Mommy right away? Soon, I promised. But my pulse was hammering. Because I knew, deep down, that I wasn't going to find what I wanted behind that door. I was about to find something else entirely. The elevator ride up felt like an eternity. My grip on the room key tightened as Sophie hummed a song, oblivious to the storm building inside me. Mason was glued to his phone, but I caught him sneaking glances at me, sensing the shift in my mood. I forced myself to breathe, think rationally. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe +1 was just a mistake, a coworker, a mix-up in the system. But my gut told me otherwise. My gut told me something was very, very wrong. Our room was standard, 2 beds, clean, generic. I barely saw it. I set down my bag and turned to the kids. All right, I said, keeping my voice light. Order whatever you want from room service. I'll be back in a bit. Sophie's brows furrowed. But aren't we surprising Mommy together? I hesitated. Yeah, just let me check something first, okay? Mason lifted his eyes. He was smarter than I sometimes gave him credit for. He studied me for a second before nodding. All right. I stepped back into the hallway, pulse hammering in my ears. 4 doors down. That's all it was. Just 4 doors. I walked slowly, my mind racing through every possibility, every explanation. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone and texted her. Hey, I'm at your hotel. Open the door. I watched the message go from sent to read. No reply. My stomach twisted into knots. She was in there. I knew it. But why wasn't she answering? I clenched my jaw and turned on my heel. I needed a key to that room. The receptionist looked up, surprised to see me again. Forget something? She asked, attempting a polite smile. I slid my key card across the counter. Yeah. Locked myself out. Can I get a new one? She nodded, tapping away at the keyboard. Of course. Then, as casually as I could, I added, oh, and can you add my wife's room to my key? We always do that when she travels. Just in case. She hesitated. I smiled like a man who wasn't about to unravel his entire marriage in the next 5 minutes. It's just easier, I added. After a pause, she swiped my card, tapped a few more keys, and handed it back. All set. I exhaled slowly, nodding. Thanks. Now I had access. Now I would know the truth. Back at her door, I didn't hesitate. I slid the key in. Beep. The green light blinked. I turned the handle. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Cologne. Sweat. Something else I couldn't, or wouldn't, name. The room was dimly lit, just a single bedside lamp glowing in the corner. The sheets were tangled. Clothes were scattered on the chair. And in the bed, Rebecca. Her bare shoulder peeked out from under the sheet, her hair messy, skin flushed. Beside her, a man. A stranger. The world stopped. Rebecca's eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the dim light, and when she saw me, saw who was standing there, her expression wasn't guilt. It wasn't even shock. It was annoyance. Like I was the problem. Like I was ruining her night. I felt something snap inside me. Slowly, she pulled the sheet up, barely covering herself, and sat up. Lucas, she whispered, voice still thick with sleep. The man beside her groaned, shifting, completely unaware of the disaster about to hit him. I stared at her, the woman I had built my life with, the mother of my children, lying in a hotel bed with someone else. My pulse pounded so hard that I could feel it in my throat, in my skull, in my fingertips. The man, Ryan, my wife's +1, shifted, frowning, his face still hazy with sleep, unaware of the tension flooding the room like poison. He finally opened his eyes, blinking up at me. And then, the realization hit him. Oh shit, he muttered. He sat up fast, reaching for his pants. Shit, man. Rebecca shot him a look, sharp and irritated, like he was making things worse, like I was the inconvenience here. I exhaled slowly. My hands were steady, though my blood felt like molten lava in my veins. My voice, when I finally spoke, came out terrifyingly calm. Who the hell is he? Rebecca opened her mouth, then closed it. Something flickered in her eyes. Calculations, excuses, strategies. Then she said the worst thing she could have possibly said in that moment. Lucas, this isn't what it looks like. I laughed. A short, humorless bark of laughter that made Ryan flinch. Not what it looks like? I repeated, taking a slow step forward. So, what exactly does it look like, Rebecca? She wrapped the sheet tighter around herself, her mouth pressing into a thin line. It's complicated. No, it's actually really fucking simple. I gestured toward Ryan. This guy? In our bed? With you? Pretty straightforward. Ryan finally spoke, his voice shaky. Look, man, Shut the fuck up, I snapped, eyes still locked on my wife. Rebecca exhaled, rubbing her temple like I was the one giving her a headache. And that was when I knew. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't devastated. She was annoyed that she got caught. Something inside me turned ice cold. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to make sure she never had a chance to hurt me, or my kids again, and she had no idea what was coming next. The silence was unbearable. Rebecca clutched the sheet around herself, her expression frozen between shock and something else, something closer to frustration than guilt. The man beside her, Ryan, sat up slowly, rubbing his face like he was still waking up from a dream that had just turned into a nightmare. My breath came in slow, controlled exhales, but my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. My world, the one I had built for her, for our children, was crumbling at my feet, and she looked at me like I was the problem. I had pictured this moment so differently. A surprise. A family reunion. Joy. Love. Instead, I was standing in a dimly lit hotel room, staring at my half-naked wife tangled in another man's arms. And she wasn't even crying. I swallowed down the fire clawing its way up my throat. Be calm. Be in control. Who is he? My voice came out low, almost foreign to my own ears. Rebecca hesitated, her lips parting, but she didn't speak. Ryan, to his credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable. I should probably. Yeah, I said, my tone flat, empty. You should. He scrambled out of bed, reaching for his pants like he was trying to get dressed faster than humanly possible. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on Rebecca, on the way she refused to meet my gaze, on the way she wasn't fighting for this. She didn't run after me. She didn't beg. She just watched. Ryan shoved his feet into his shoes, mumbling something under his breath before brushing past me, his head down like a child caught doing something forbidden. The door shut behind him, and just like that, it was only the two of us. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Stay in control. How long? I asked, my voice quieter now. Rebecca closed her eyes for a second, like she was debating whether to lie. Then, she exhaled. Lucas. How long? Another pause. Then, about 6 months. I felt my knees buckle, but I stayed upright. 6 months. 6 months of lies. 6 months of coming home late, of fake smiles, of kisses that meant nothing, of whispered goodnights that now felt like a goddamn joke. 6 months of waking up next to someone who had already left me long ago. I forced myself to swallow. The kids? She finally looked up. What about them? I laughed, sharp and humorless. Did you even think about them while you were? I gestured vaguely at the bed, at the ruined sheets, at the wreckage of our life. Her face twisted. Of course I thought about them. Just not enough to stop, right? Her mouth opened, then closed again. I dragged a hand down my face, trying to process, trying to breathe. Jesus Christ, Rebecca? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking small, vulnerable. Lucas, I never meant for it to be like this. Like what? My voice cracked, and I hated how broken it sounded. You mean you never meant for me to find out? She looked away. I laughed again, but it felt more like a sob. This wasn't just some meaningless fling. This was 6 months. This was a second life she built behind my back. I took a slow, measured breath. Do they know? Her head snapped up. What? No. Of course not. I stared at her, searching for any flicker of the woman I had once known, the woman I had once trusted with everything. But all I saw was a stranger. Did you ever plan on telling me? She flinched, just barely, and I had my answer. She never would have told me. She would have kept living this double life, coming home to our children, kissing me goodnight with the same lips that had whispered someone else's name. I shook my head, stepping back like I needed physical distance from her. I don't even know who you are anymore. Her lips trembled. Lucas, please. No, I cut her off. You don't get to say my name like that. You don't get to look at me like I'm the one ruining this. She clenched her jaw, something flickering behind her eyes, anger. Like she was offended by my reaction. Lucas, we haven't been happy for a long time, she said, her voice sharper now. I laughed again, a broken, bitter sound. Oh, so that makes it okay? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Rebecca? I took a step forward, and she shrank back, pressing herself against the headboard. Because all I hear is excuse after excuse, and none of it changes the fact that you chose this. Her breathing was uneven now, her hands trembling slightly. I didn't mean to fall out of love with you, Lucas. It felt like a knife to the gut. I sucked in a breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. Then when, Rebecca, when did you stop? She blinked, her face crumbling. I don't know, she whispered. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. She didn't know, because it had happened slowly, quietly, in the spaces between our conversations, in the moments I didn't even realize were slipping through my fingers. I had lost her a long time ago. I just hadn't known it. I turned toward the door. I'm taking the kids home. Her head snapped up. Lucas, wait. I paused, looking at her over my shoulder. Wait for what? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her lips trembled. We can fix this. I felt something inside me shatter completely. No, Rebecca, I said, shaking my head. We can't. She let out a soft, broken sob, covering her face with her hands. And I walked out. For the first time since this nightmare started, I knew exactly what I had to do. I had to get my kids as far away from this as possible. Because even if she had stopped loving me, I would never stop loving them. I walked down the hallway like a ghost drifting through a world I no longer belonged to. My feet moved on their own, but my mind was stuck in that hotel room. Stuck in the moment when everything I thought I knew collapsed. Rebecca, 6 months. The words kept repeating in my head like a broken record, each time cutting a little deeper. I had spent so long believing that we were just busy, that marriage had its ups and downs, that the distance between us was temporary. But it wasn't. It had been a choice. Her choice. And now, I had to make mine. I reached the hotel room door and stopped. My hand hovered over the handle as I forced myself to take a breath. Be calm. They don't know. They don't deserve this wait. Then, I stepped inside. Sophie was still awake. Her tiny legs curled under her as she flipped through a book. The TV hummed in the background, casting soft colors across the room. Mason sat on the other bed, his phone in hand. But his gaze flickered up the second I walked in. Daddy! Sophie beamed, closing her book. Did you find Mommy? Was she so happy? My heart twisted painfully. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. She's busy, sweetheart. We'll see her later. She pouted for a second, but didn't question it. Okay. Did you know Mason said he doesn't like chocolate ice cream anymore? Can you believe that? I let out a small, breathy chuckle, one that wasn't quite real. No way. Since when? Mason didn't laugh. He didn't engage in the joke. He just watched me. I turned away before he could say anything. I was thinking, I said, forcing my voice to be light. Normal. Why don't we go do something fun? Maybe get some ice cream. Take a little walk before bed? Sophie gasped like I had just given her the best news of her life. Yes. Can I get extra sprinkles? You can get all the sprinkles you want. She squealed, jumping up to find her shoes. Mason didn't move. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. What's going on? The question hit harder than it should have. He was 13. Too young to carry this. Too young to already see through me. Nothing, I said too quickly. I just thought it'd be fun. That's all. He didn't believe me, but he let it go. For now, the streets of Chicago were alive, buzzing with movement and laughter and life. People passed by in clusters, wrapped in their own little worlds. The neon signs of bars and restaurants flickered, the scent of fresh waffles and grilled food drifting through the air. It should have felt magical. Instead, it felt hollow. Sophie walked beside me, swinging our hands together, while Mason trailed slightly behind. We found a small ice cream shop, warm and inviting, the kind of place that felt like a childhood memory. Sophie ordered her mountain of sprinkles. Mason kept it simple. I didn't even care what I got. We sat by the window, the bright colors of the city outside reflected in the glass. Sophie chatted about everything. Her friends, a funny joke she heard, a dog she saw outside that looked like a very, very small horse. Mason, though, was quiet, and I knew why. Then, my phone buzzed. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Rebecca. I pulled it out anyway. Rebecca, where are you? I stared at the message, my fingers gripping the phone a little too tightly. Another message popped up. Rebecca, we need to talk. I pictured her perfectly, sitting in that hotel bed, tangled in sheets that weren't ours, texting me like nothing had changed, like she hadn't just shattered everything. I turned off my phone and slid it back into my pocket. She didn't get to ask where I was. She didn't get to demand anything from me. For so long, I had chosen her. For so long, I had put her first. Not anymore. By the time we got back to the hotel, I had made up my mind. We weren't staying. Not in this hotel. Not in this city. Not anywhere near her. Sophie had fallen asleep against my shoulder during the cab ride back, her small hand curled around my jacket. I carried her inside, her weight warm and familiar against me. Mason followed, watching, waiting. I tucked Sophie into bed, brushing a loose curl from her face. Then, when I turned, Mason was there, standing near the door. And this time, he didn't hesitate. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? The words felt like a physical hit. I inhaled sharply. Mason, just tell me the truth. I hesitated. He deserved honesty. I exhaled, sitting on the edge of the bed. I don't know yet, but things are going to change. His jaw tightened. Because she cheated. The air in the room seemed to grow heavier. I stared at him. Mason, I'm not stupid, Dad, he muttered. I saw your face when you came back, and I've seen how she's been acting for months. I just didn't want to believe it. I ran a hand through my hair, my chest aching. He had known. He had felt the cracks in our family long before tonight. I reached for his shoulder, gripping it firmly. Listen to me, Mason. No matter what happens between your mom and me, I need you to know this isn't about you. Or Sophie. We love you both more than anything in the world. He swallowed hard, looking down. I know. I squeezed his shoulder once before letting go. We're leaving first thing in the morning. I already booked the flights. Mason nodded, like he had expected this. Then, after a long pause, he whispered, She didn't even ask to see us, did she? My throat closed up. Because he was right. Rebecca had texted. She had asked about me, but she hadn't once asked about them. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of something much, much deeper. I took a shaky breath and shook my head. No, she didn't. Mason exhaled, looking away. Figures. I felt something inside me shatter. She had given up on us long before tonight, and I was done trying to fix it. At 5 a.m., we were gone. No note, no goodbye, no explanation, just 3 one-way tickets home. Because I wasn't going to wait for Rebecca to realize what she had lost. By the time she did, we would already be gone. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Not the Rebecca I had fallen in love with, not the mother of my children, not the woman I had built a life with. No, I saw this Rebecca, the one who had looked at me with annoyance instead of guilt, the one who had already let go of us long before I even realized it. The betrayal itself hurt, but the worst part? She didn't even fight for us. She didn't reach for me. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She just watched, like I was an inconvenience, like I was already gone. I lay in the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything I had refused to see for so long. Beside me, Sophie slept soundly, her tiny fingers gripping the sleeve of my hoodie. Even in sleep, she held on. Like she knew. Like she could sense that something had shifted in her world, even if she didn't understand it yet. Mason, in the other bed, lay with his back to me, perfectly still. But I knew he wasn't sleeping either. His breathing was too controlled. His body was too tense. He wasn't ready to talk. And I wasn't ready to say the words he already knew. But I had to protect them. I had to get them away from this before it touched them, because they still believed in her. And I couldn't let her break them the way she had broken me. At 4:30 a.m., I booked the earliest flight home. One way, no return. I moved quietly, packing Sophie's favorite pajamas, her tiny socks that always got lost in the laundry, her pink stuffed bear that she never slept without. I grabbed Mason's hoodie from the chair, folding it neatly before slipping it into his backpack. Every movement felt heavy. Every decision felt final. This wasn't just a trip home. This was leaving. For good. I sat on the edge of Mason's bed and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't flinch. He just opened his eyes. "We're leaving," I whispered. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask if his mom was coming too. He just nodded. "Okay." His voice was quiet. Steady. Too steady for a 13-year-old. I hesitated. "You okay?" Mason exhaled, staring at the ceiling for a moment. Then he turned to look at me. "Are you?" I tried to smile, but it felt weak. "I don't know," I admitted. And for the first time that night, Mason gave me a small, tired smile. "Me neither." Sophie was the hardest. When I lifted her, she stirred, pressing her face against my chest. "Daddy," she mumbled, her voice thick with sleep. "Sure, baby," I whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Go back to sleep." She yawned and curled against me, her tiny hands still holding onto my hoodie. She trusted me completely, and I would never break that trust. The ride to the airport was silent. Mason sat beside me, hood up, staring out the window. I could see his reflection in the glass, the way his jaw was clenched, the way his hands were stuffed into his pockets like he was holding something in. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell him it was okay to be angry, that he didn't have to hold it all inside. But I knew him too well. He needed time. Sophie was still half asleep, curled against me, her breath warm on my chest. I held her closer. Somewhere out there, Rebecca was still in that hotel room. Maybe she had woken up by now. Maybe she had reached for him instead of me. Maybe she had seen my messages, unread. My calls, ignored. Maybe she had finally realized we were gone. And I wondered, did she even feel it? Did she even care? At the airport, I checked us in, got our tickets, led the kids through security. We sat at our gate, waiting. Then, my phone buzzed. I didn't need to check it to know who it was. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I pulled it out. "Rebecca, where are you?" Not "where are the kids?" Not "are they okay?" Just "where are you?" A hollow feeling settled in my chest. A second message popped up. "Rebecca, Lucas, you can't just take them like this. We need to talk." Talk? Talk about what? How she had spent months lying to me. How she had looked me in the eye so many times and told me she loved me while sleeping beside another man. How she hadn't even thought to check if our children were okay. My fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask her why. But I already knew the answer. And I wasn't going to let her twist it into something else. I exhaled. Then, without another thought, I turned off my phone and slid it into my pocket. She didn't get to ask where I was anymore. She didn't get to ask for anything. She had made her choice. And I had made mine. The flight home was quiet. Sophie slept the whole time, her small body tucked against me, breathing softly. Mason stared out the window, silent. I could feel the weight of what he wasn't saying. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that we would be okay. That love, real love, doesn't do this. That love doesn't lie. That love doesn't walk away. But the words stuck in my throat, because I didn't know if it was true. All I knew was that I was done. Done waiting. Done pretending. Done making excuses for someone who had already let go. And by the time she realized what she had lost, we would already be gone. The house felt different, not in the way that a place feels different after a vacation, where the air is a little stale, where the walls seem unfamiliar for the first few minutes. No, this was something else. It was the kind of different that settles into your bones. The kind that tells you, in no uncertain terms, things will never be the same again. Sophie didn't notice. She burst through the door, dropping her little backpack by the couch, her voice light and full of something I wished I could still feel. "Daddy, can I make Mommy a card? For when she comes home." She was already running toward the kitchen, where we kept her crayons, not waiting for an answer. I stood frozen in the entryway, my heart cracking at the edges. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her the truth. But how do you tell a child, your child, that their mother has already left them in ways they don't yet understand? How do you take that innocence away? So I did what I could. I swallowed back the lump in my throat, forced a smile, and said, "Of course, sweetheart." She beamed, completely unaware of the way my hands clenched into fists at my sides. I turned away so she wouldn't see the tears burning in my eyes. Hold it together. Not for me. For them. Mason hadn't moved from the doorway. He wasn't like Sophie. He had been watching me since we left the airport, since the moment we got into the car, since the second I told him we were going home without her. Now, he stood there, his face blank, his hands shoved into his hoodie pockets. "She's not coming back, is she?" His voice was too calm, too old for 13. I exhaled slowly, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I said finally. It wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't what he deserved. Mason gave a small nod, his jaw tightening just slightly before he turned and walked upstairs. He didn't slam the door. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. And somehow, that hurt more than anything. I spent the next few hours moving through the house like a ghost, unpacking bags, folding clothes, doing anything to stay busy. Anything to keep my mind from going back to that hotel room, to that bed, to that look in her eyes, the one that told me she had already let go of this family long before I ever knew. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, her tongue sticking out in concentration as she carefully wrote in big, uneven letters. "I love you, Mommy." She colored in a heart, added stars around the edges. She held it up, her little face glowing with pride. "She's gonna love this," she said. "Can we put it on the fridge?" I stared at the paper, at the innocence wrapped inside it, at the faith she still had in someone who had already walked away. I swallowed against the ache in my throat and took the paper from her gently. "Yeah, baby," I whispered. "Of course." I pressed it onto the fridge with a magnet, my fingers lingering on the edges longer than they should have. And I realized this card would stay here. For weeks. For months. Until one day, Sophie wouldn't look for it anymore. Until one day, she'd stop asking when Mommy was coming home. Until one day, I'd have to take it down. And that day would break me in ways I wasn't ready to face. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The house was silent. Not the peaceful kind. The hollow kind. The kind of silence that used to be filled by Rebecca's presence, by the sound of her voice, by the space she once took up in this home, in this life. She was really gone. Not just physically, but in every way that mattered. I pulled out my phone for the first time since we left. It lit up instantly. For missed calls. 3 texts. I hesitated. Then, slowly, I opened them. "Rebecca. Lucas, we need to talk. Please call me. Rebecca. You can't just take the kids without discussing this. This isn't fair. Rebecca. At least let me talk to them." I exhaled, slow and steady, staring at the words. She hadn't fought for me. She hadn't begged me to come back. She hadn't said she was sorry. She hadn't even asked if the kids were okay. I clenched my jaw, my thumb hovering over the screen. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell her that this was her fault, that she had no right to act like she had lost something when she had thrown it away herself, that she was the one who left us first. But I didn't, because she didn't deserve a response. Not now. Not ever. I turned off my phone, set it face down on the table, and leaned back into the silence. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for her anymore.